Hey guys, welcome to our Friday night wealth creation course. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jerry. If you're just tuning in for the first time, we do these every single Friday. And the purpose of these courses is to help create financially educated and wealthy individuals, people that know money, they understand it, and they feel certain about using it to navigate their economic futures. Tonight's topic, legacy planning. Okay. So we've gone through this entire cycle on what we call the life cycle of a sacred account, showing how the sacred account is involved in every single part of your life. We're finishing the series tonight with legacy planning and really going over how you can use this to leave a legacy. And I'm going to go ahead and dive into it. So real quick, when you think legacy, I want you to think about what it is you're leaving behind. Okay, now for a lot of us, we might not think about this ahead of the game. We might think about this midway through life. Some of us never think about it at all. But what are you leaving behind? Okay, you're going to leave something behind, whether you realize it or not. What is it going to be? Is it going to be on purpose? Is it intentional? Or is it something that's going to be just by happenstance or as a byproduct? So again, we're going to decode this. Decoding, again, means to translate data or a message from a code into its original language or form. The definition of legacy, very specific: a gift of property, especially personal property, as money by will. Okay, so the gift of property, especially personal property, as money by will. So when you think legacy, we're talking really about a financial legacy. We're handling how do we leave money for the organizations, the people we care about, so that they can live abundant and prosperous lives because of what we did while we were here. Now, here's some interesting facts. Check this out. 69% of retirees worldwide, on average, plan to leave an inheritance of about $148,000 worldwide across all countries, all demographics. That's the average. This was interesting. Americans, when surveyed, were least likely to give an inheritance. Only 56% of Americans surveyed said they would leave an inheritance for their children. Okay. India was actually the highest. They were 86%. Okay, so I want you to really kind of wrap your mind around this. In America, we have the highest incomes. Okay, we have some of the lower taxes. We have the lowest savings rate, and we have the lowest amount of people that surveyed say they're going to leave a legacy for their kids. When you think India, they don't have the highest income. How do taxes? Anyone know what taxes are like in India? No, I can't imagine they're good. And they have the highest amount of people that say they're going to leave a legacy, a financial legacy. So you can really see that this is an intention and a mindset. It's not something that you're luckily going to stumble into. It's an intention and a mindset. Okay, the idea of I'm going to leave a legacy happens before you're wealthy. A lot of these people probably aren't wealthy, but they care enough to say, hey, I'm going to do this. Now, this was interesting. Americans, we looked at 56% are going to leave a legacy. That's the lowest number. But also 2/3 of Americans expect to partially fund their retirement account with an inheritance. So look at the math there. More than 2/3 of America plans on funding their retirement with an inheritance, but the people that are leaving the inheritances are saying, well, we're really not planning on doing that. Okay, someone's going to have a rude retirement when they find out that they didn't have the money they thought they'd have. Okay, the stat here is showing us that these people are relying on these people. These people are saying that they don't plan on being there to do that. This group is going to end up having a disconnect when they expect inheritance money that didn't actually show up. Okay, so I really want to inspire, be like the Indians. In the sense, you want to really think about legacy. 86% of Americans should want to leave a legacy. Now, the only reason you wouldn't want to leave a legacy is A, you don't understand what that means, or B, and it would still come from a lack of understanding, you don't trust the people you're giving it to. You don't think they're going to do a good job with it. So either you don't know how to produce it, otherwise you would, or you do know how to produce it, but you don't trust that if you give it to your kids, you give it to your grandkids, that it's going to be helpful and beneficial to them. Those are the only two reasons why you wouldn't leave a legacy. And so I want to kind of call you out on if you're on the first one, we're handling the education tonight. So there's not a reason why you should walk away from this feeling uneducated and uncertain on doing this. If you're handling the second one, which is, well, my kids are going to waste it, that's kind of your fault. They're your kids. They're your grandkids. So if you didn't educate them, that's the only reason why they would waste it. It means that you're not prepping them to be holders of your legacy. When you go back, we talked last week about the family office concept. those people prepped their children and their grandchildren and their heirs to do a good job with that money. So the kids were ready for it. They understood it. And there was also clauses in those estate documents that would say, if you don't meet these criteria, you can't get that money. You don't get it, right? So some of the myths about legacy. Number one is that you have to have wealth to leave a legacy. Who's heard that myth before? Legacies are only if you have money and you're wealthy. Never heard that? Mike, you've heard that? Okay. This is one I actually grew up with. Like, we never talked about wills. We never talked about inheritances. When I finally was old enough where I heard people talking about like they're getting an inheritance from grandpa, grandma, it's almost seemed like a lucky, like kind of a too good to be true type thing. So the myth is that you have to be wealthy to do that. The next myth is that leaving a legacy will spoil your children. Who has heard that before? Anybody? Yeah. Okay, that's like probably one of the main ones, is if you do this, you're going to spoil your kids. Who's heard this one? Leaving a legacy is more than just money. Like it's like, why? Like, I don't have money, but I'm going to make sure my kids are good humans. Kind of that mindset instead. Legacy is only financial. That's a myth as well. A legacy cannot be controlled once you give it. That's another one. Who's kind of seeing that mindset of, well, I don't want to give it to them. They're just going to blow it all. They're just going to waste it. They're going to go buy a new car. I could have the new car. Therefore, I might as well not give it to them. Right. The other one we have here is that leaving a legacy is complicated. That's a myth. And then we have, you can plan for that when you're old and going to die. Like, once you get there, you'll figure it out. That's an attitude people take on. And then the last one here is that a legacy left to someone else means that you can't use your money today. It's almost the poverty mindset of, if I give it to these people when I die, there's less for me to use while I'm living. Right? So these are all myths. And the reason why I singled these out, I really thought about, like, before I understood legacy, what were some of the myths that I was operating on? And then looking around when I talk to clients and see people day to day, what are the myths that they're operating on? And I would say the top ones are probably this guy, and I would say also this guy. Okay, the idea of you've got to be wealthy in order to do it. If you do it, it's going to spoil your kids. And since you can't control it, you may as well not give it at all. And then the justification, as Mike mentioned, is that it's more than just financial. Okay, it's the reason people use for not leaving a legacy. Now, here's some of the truths about this. Now, I added these little red guys in here so we can start keeping track of the myths and truths a little better. So here's the truth. The myth is that you've got to be wealthy to leave a legacy. Okay, the truth about that is legacies are left every day with life insurance. So ideally, yeah, I'm wealthy, and that's the plan, and I'm going to leave a legacy that way. But what I'm telling you is that there are well-known people that got wealthy because grandma had a life insurance policy. She wasn't wealthy, and when she died, it changed their lives. That's one of the main reasons you have life insurance. It's not always mom and dad with two kids, and a lot of times it is grandparents. They understand and realize that it could literally change the game for the rest of their generations. And yeah, they might not have understood money early on in life, but they're not in apathy and they're not going to just quit. They're going to do something about it. So that's a myth. You don't need to be rich. You just have to be able to have something in place that does that for you. The other one is that your kids will act spoiled. Leaving a legacy will only amplify your children. It's going to make them more of what they already are. So if you give them money and they turn out to be a-holes, that probably means you raised a-holes. They were like that before they got the money. Okay, so if they act spoiled, that's on you as a parent. It's not because of the money you gave them. It means that you didn't raise them in a way where they didn't act that way once you gave them money. The other one is that a legacy is not just financial. Those who justify why they're broke and not going to leave a legacy for their kids and grandkids will talk instead of leaving behind esoteric concepts that will always seem philosophically better than money. Now, here's the deal. It's like, so someone will say, and tell me if you guys have ever heard this. They're like, if you talk about money and they're like, well, I'm not rich and my kids won't be rich, but they're going to know how to treat the janitor. They're going to be kind, or they're going to be grateful. We've all heard that. And I don't want to tell you not to teach that to your kids, because you should. I'm going to tell you, you should be doing that anyways. That's called being a good parent. That's called being a good leader or mentor. So if you're leaving a legacy, it should be financial, and it should be above and beyond the fact that you already taught your kids how to be good human beings. Okay. It's not exchangeable. It's not like if you're responsible and you're able, it's not an alternative for leaving a financial legacy for your family. It's not an alternative for setting their futures up. If you had the ability to, you almost have to look at that as an ethical thing. Okay, I had the ability to, therefore I went for it. Not I had the ability to, I squandered it. And so instead, I'm just going to say I left them a bunch of good qualities. Okay, the next one here, the truth behind the legacy being complicated and out of your control. So this is really how you keep it uncomplicated and in your control. So a legacy is financial, but it's also systematic. So if I just left money, if I had a bunch of people and I just gave them money based on human behavior, what do you think they're probably going to do with it? It's going to go downhill. It's the lottery winner effect. You guys ever seen those stories? People win the lottery, and I think the stat is they're broke within 2 years, right? Or NFL football players. What's the stat on that one, Nano?
I think they're broke within 4 years.
Of retiring from the league?
Yeah.
Within 4 years, the average, they're broke. So that's how you actually prevent this. So you do leave money. It is financial. It's not only financial. You leave a financial legacy, and you leave a system with which that financial legacy will be managed. Okay, no different than you wouldn't hire an employee and not give them a system on how to do their job. You can't really blame the employee when they suck at their job. You just didn't have a system. So you would leave a system on how that financial legacy would be used. Okay, so you must have goals, purposes, and plans in place with the legacy you leave and a way to communicate those. Your system should communicate your goals, your purposes, and your plans, and it should enforce them so that they're actually met and they're carried out. When you do that, that's actually leaving a legacy instead of just leaving money. A legacy, by definition, to be a legacy, it's got to carry forth. It's got to carry on, right? So if I give $1 million to my kids and it's gone in 2 years, was that really a legacy? Not really, right? I gave them a really fun 24-month period after I died. It's gone now. So the system is what actually makes it last, and it gives it longevity. Now, the next part here is that you can't control it. That's the myth. The truth is that through a trust, you can control every last cent of your money before and after you die. That's how the wealthy do it. They use a trust. They outline in the trust how the money can be used, the circumstances under which it can be accessed. When it can't be used, they have a trustee that manages that trust to make sure it gets followed. And it's all a legal proceeding. It's simply just following the system, right? So if I'm winging it, it's not going to turn out good. If I'm following the system and I have a trust, I've got my goals and purposes in that trust. I've got the plans in which the money can be used inside that trust. And I've got someone managing it to make sure it happens, then the legacy actually works. Okay. The other one is that legacies are complicated. The truth is they're simple. Okay. So it's simple. It's one of those things that's easy to do. It's not complicated, but it takes a lot of hard work and all of the other things that people generally don't like doing. Therefore, we give the blanket statement of it's complicated. Okay, think about like nutrition. Nano, is nutrition really that complicated? Once you understand it, and even from a baseline, eat less than you burn. That's super simple. I would only complicate it because I'm not doing it, right? So the legacy thing, it's not complicated, but to leave a legacy, you would have had to earn more money than most people do. You would have had to save more money than most people were saving. You would have had to invest when other people weren't. And because of those things, you would have a legacy. The failure to do those things would cause you to not have a legacy, in which case it's easier just to say, oh, it's complicated. Right? And that's probably what you're telling your kids when they ask, why are they driving that car and we're driving this one? It's complicated. Okay. That's what this comes down to. It's very simple, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work. A legacy is a mindset that you think about past yourself. So this is the idea that you'll never be able to use it, and it's not something that you have access to because someone else is going to have access to it. The mindset that you only think of yourself until you die is you're selfish. That's where that comes from. So for you to say, I'm never going to give it to my kids, if I'm going to give it to them and they're going to blow it when I could be using it, like, you have poverty mindset because you're not thinking about how about I just make the pie bigger so that I can leave them money and I can have money for myself. And then B, you're not thinking ahead. Like that's not really even a client I would want to work with. Somebody that's like, screw everything. I just want a bunch of money. Like that's the stigma that we all say that money is evil because of that mindset. Yet the very same guy that tells me money is evil will have that mindset. If you don't have the mindset from the get-go, guys, from the get-go that you want to build something bigger than just yourself, this wealth thing is never going to work for you. You're probably never actually going to get there because you have no real purpose. And if you did somehow get there, you would be a sucky human being. Like you wouldn't have anyone to leave a legacy to, because you would have no purpose other than just your own gratification, which you can't solve with money. So yeah, you're going to own stuff, but you're going to have no drive in life. You're going to get burnt out easier. Now, the very final one, the myth here, is that if you give it to them, you can't use it yourself, right? If I set up a trust, if I set up a will, if I decide I'm going to give these assets to these people, it's the idea that I can't use it for myself. So a legacy means that you get to continue to grow and use your wealth while you build it, while you enjoy it, prior to you dispersing your legacy. And there's no restriction on you being able to still use that money. Did you know when you put assets in a trust, in a revocable living trust, you still have access to all of those assets? You're not losing out on anything. Now, you do have systems in place now that you've got to be aware of, and you do have people in the future that you've put those assets towards, but it doesn't mean they're not yours anymore. It doesn't mean that if you own real estate, you can't live off the cash flow. Okay, it doesn't mean that they're not your properties. It doesn't mean that the sacred account now belongs to somebody else. It's still all your stuff. It's just set up a little bit differently now with the intention that you're going to pass it on to somebody else when you pass away, right? So those are some of the myths about legacy. Now, why should we leave a legacy? Now, check this out. And this is, for me, super deep. I love the legacy idea because of this. A legacy is the most practical way to live beyond your life in this world. Okay, I want you to think about, like, if you passed away today, what would others remember you by? So what are some of the things just in the room we would hope others would remember us by? Personality, funny. What else?
Courage, persistence.
Courage and persistence. Okay, Lexi? Bravery, right? So those are all things that we would hope to be remembered by. Now, those are all good things. Those are valid. But check this out. The only people that are going to remember you by those things are the ones that experienced it, right? So what about when they die? How are you going to be remembered at that point? Dust in the wind. So what I'm saying is a financial legacy. If you do this right, like my friend Cliff wants to own a castle, right? They're going to remember a castle for several generations. People would be like, where did you get the castle from? And they'd be like, oh, we had this crazy guy that we were related to like 30, 40 years back, and he got us this castle, right? And so you actually further strengthen personality and funny and brave and courageous and all this other stuff, because you give a tangible indicator in the world, a tangible symbol or token of you. When people ask about it, there's the story of, well, Nano built us this, or Nano bought us this mansion, this estate, with the money that he earned because he was a brave, courageous guy. Here's all the stuff he did. So it actually further affirms a lot of the stuff that we naturally want to be remembered by having a physical, practical financial example. Here's a cool one. Check this out. If you do such a good job, like think about like the Waltons. You do such a good job where you leave enough money where your kids never have to work a job again. They can run the family business, or they can run the nonprofit, or they can do the thing they're passionate about. And they don't have to live the lifestyle that the average person has to live. They don't have to go through student loans, or they don't have to go through vehicle debt. They don't have to go through any of the stuff we deal with because they got plugged into the legacy. How inspiring would that be? That's pretty cool, right? And so that's really, like, for me, when I think legacy, it's leaving a changed environment around us through assets and impact that survives you, means that your purpose lives on. So your goals, your purposes can live on. And if you do a good enough job planning this stuff out. So what I keep going back to is doing a good enough job planning this stuff out, leaving a legacy. Like, if you think of it today, like, what are the things that matter to you? Who are the people that are going to matter to you? And what is the impact you want to make? You can build your entire blueprint to where those things happen in the future. It's simply like right now where you're living, really being specific about what you want to have happen, and then making sure you have means to fund it. And then through your estate plan, making sure that the assets are distributed in a way where all of that stuff actually happens. No different than like a recipe. Jethro, if you have a recipe and you follow the recipe exactly the way it says to, what are the chances you're going to cook what it says you're supposed to?
Pretty good.
Probably 100% almost, right? Okay, with margin for a few people that somehow they're going to mess it up or burn it. But for the most part, like, you're going to pretty much get that dish. With this, that's what I'm saying, is if you do this, like you do a recipe, you do this specific and well enough where all of this stuff is lined out. It just has to be funded and then followed. Like, this is a systematic plan to make sure your purpose outlives you. So that's the main reason why. Now, the other one is the legacy is the best way to show you care about someone or something. Okay, I can tell someone I care, and that's great. I can tell someone in my will that they were the best son in the world and all this other stuff. But the best way to go about it is to actually impact their life, to change their life. Like, for example, if I know somebody in my life always wanted to run a business, and in my legacy, I set it up to where they've got money now to fund the business. Like, that's kind of an impactful thing. That's going to be a great way to show them that I actually care enough to actually help them live a life that I would want to see them live, even if I'm not around to help them live it. Now, the other thing you got to realize is the IRS wants you to leave a legacy. Okay, that's why you have things like gift taxes. That's why they give you an exclusion on the first $22 million of your estate tax bill. That's why you have trusts. That's why you have corporations. The IRS wants you doing that. When they see wealth, and that's why, like, when it's above a certain amount, they keep it off the top. They do the estate tax thing. But below that amount, they want wealth transferring. They want money changing hands. You have to realize a lot of times legacies, unfortunately, are financial hoarders. It's people that they just stacked their pennies up and they just scrounged and scrounged and scrounged. And they have $2 million in quarters and nobody knew about it. And they worked as a janitor all their life and they died. Someone found out they had that money. Well, the IRS looks at that and they think that could have been money that was in the economy growing, moving, and being taxed. So they want to see that that money is actively being put to use. If you're doing a legacy plan, like, that's why they would have a trust. The trust is going to own your assets versus you just sticking it all in a bank because you don't know what to do with it. They're saying if you put it in a trust, you avoid probate and you're able to keep that money working. When it's in the trust, it's probably invested in assets that are producing, and there's ways around that, right? So do the things they incentivize you to do. Like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the IRS will incentivize the things that they want to have happen. They can't personally carry out themselves. So having money transfer like that through qualified vehicles, that's something they want to have happen. They want to see generational wealth being passed on. Now, the final one is you need a bigger goal than yourself so you don't quit, settle, or burn out. Who here has felt that before, where you're going strong, and then suddenly you feel like you just hit a wall? Okay, it happens. It happens. It's a real thing. In Alaska, I would argue it happens a little bit more to us than other states. Okay, like the darkness in the wintertime, the cold, that's a real thing. It sets in and you're like, man, I was motivated all summer. Boom, there's a wall, right? So you have to have a purpose bigger than you. If you're doing all of this work, all of this production, because ultimately all of this comes down to like making, saving, and investing, right? So if I've got these wealth goals for myself and I'm motivated and I'm pumped and I'm writing my goals down every day and it comes down to just make more money, what's going to happen the day where I get out of bed and I don't feel like it? Yeah, I can say I should because that's my goal, but everyone has that, right? Everyone technically has a goal and they don't follow through on it. So I've got to look at, here's my purpose. And if it's really my purpose, it should almost, it's not going to be an excitement. It's going to feel like a duty. Like if you have a kid, Jeremy, you've had kids. If you have a kid and they wake up in the middle of the night and they've got to go to the bathroom and they're hungry, like you kind of just get out of bed and do it, right? No. So certain parents will do that.
What age?
Let's say when they're like 1.5, 2 years old, you have to. It's your duty. You're like, I don't have an option. Otherwise, like my kid's gonna starve or they're gonna have an accident or something's gonna happen. So that's where it's like you would get out of bed for that. You probably wouldn't get out of bed for yourself. You would get out of bed, you would get into production and get on track with your goals for that purpose that's bigger than yourself, and you probably wouldn't do it for yourself. Now, you should have both, ideally. Like, you do want to be a self-motivated person. You can't always just be propitiating over to other people and saying, well, I'll do it for them, but not for me. You do need to have your own goals, and you do need to be a little bit selfish with that. Otherwise, you're not going to have fun. But if you have both of those things, that's killer. Like, that's a difference maker in your life, and it's a difference maker in their life. And if you have this ahead of time, check this out. Who here would like to build this for their family? Tell them that they were going to build it ahead of time, show them while it was being built, and then say, I told you so on the back end when you hand it over to them. That'd be pretty dope, right? And so that's what you're doing here is you're saying, I've got goals. I have kids, I have grandkids, I have charities, churches, nonprofits. I want to build this thing, and I'm communicating that, and I'm showing them as I'm doing it. Like, I have a client I talked to today. We're going to help them cash money out of their home and use that to invest. He's got a bunch of boys. He's going to sit down with them and show them what they're going to do. He wants them to see this is all the stuff that you guys hear me talking about. The youngest is like 9 years old. The oldest is grown up and out of the house. They're all in that age where they can see the math now. And so he's looking at, all right, I want to show them how I'm going to take this thing that's usually not going to produce for us, turn it into an asset and invest it to pay us. And they're going to see that at that age. Can you imagine what they're going to think when they go to an economics class and they're learning about put your money in a 401k plan, pay off your house? And they're like, yeah, my dad borrowed against his. That's super cool to have that experience. So this is why legacy is like, it should be the top priority, the top focus for you in your entire blueprint. All of it should be, what's my legacy? And the thing is if you have this legacy, it goes back to this, you're going to enjoy the journey a lot more. You're going to enjoy the process a lot more because you know what you're building. Now, what are the components? To have a legacy, the first thing you got to have is you have to have a producer. Okay, somebody who actually brings forth the money, the assets, the means to make it happen. So, Nano, who is the producer in your legacy? You, right? So you got to be the producer. That's it might sound like a simple question, but Nano, how many people do you see that they don't think about it that way?
It's anything but them.
Anything but them. It's almost like they're hoping to be saved. Like they're hoping that goes back to the 2/3 of Americans think the retirement's going to be covered through someone else's inheritance. They're hoping someone else did the production for them. So you have to solely set that square on your shoulders. I'm rereading the book Atlas Shrugged. Great book. It talks about production, and it's a good example of like realizing it's my duty to produce. It is my duty to produce because basically the entire world is held together by the producers. Handful of guys that do all the work, no one else does. And if the handful of guys don't do the work, everything falls apart. Yeah, that sucks sometimes. You're not going to be appreciated for it. No one's going to look at it and be like, man, look at all the money you just made so that we have an economy and you built these vehicles and this. They're probably going to call you evil. But if you don't do the production, the stuff doesn't happen for you. You've got to have the producer. The next component here is you've got to have the heirs. So you've got to have the people and organizations that you care about. Okay, who right now, like when you think about this, you can already think of people and organizations you would want to leave a legacy to. Okay, all of us, like instantly on the top of our heads, we're like, yep, I would leave it to this guy. I want to leave it to my parents. I want to leave it to these people, this organization, this church. It's naturally in us to want to help. And so you have to have those heirs picked out ahead of time. Even if you don't have the assets and the money yet, you've got to have the mindset that those are the people you're going to serve and help. Okay, so you have the heirs. You do need to have money and assets. Okay, the money and assets do need to be yours. You can't leave them somebody else's legacy. Jeremy's like, what? Why am I here? The money and assets do need to be yours. The next component is you need to have a will. Okay, you need to have a revocable living trust. You need to have your sacred account. At some point, you will need an irrevocable living trust, and you'll need corporations. Okay, these are all components and tools that at various times, they're going to do various things for you in your legacy. Understanding what each of these is about, how it functions, how to put one together, whether or not you have one, all of those things is vital. Okay, I can't tell you guys how many times I see people that they're producers, they have people they care about, they have money and assets, but they have none of this stuff. Okay, and I'm going to show you what happens when that's the case, but you want to make sure you have this stuff, even if you're just starting out. Like think about it from the standpoint of just having a plan. Even if you're just starting out, you want to have a plan. Even if it's a little plan with a little bit of assets and a few people, like it's a plan, it's better than nothing. You're going to evolve it over time. And if you have one, A, you're planting your stake in the ground, saying you're going to have wealth and you're going to have a legacy. And B, it actually gives you a thing to actually like look at. It's tangible. It exists now. It's in the world. Okay. A lot of people avoid this simply because they have maybe mixed feelings or emotions about this. Now, how do you do it? The steps you're going to take. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to decide you want to leave a legacy. Okay. Anyone in the room actually made that decision before? Okay. So that's why you would be here, right? If you're watching this, you've probably made that decision. You decided you want to leave a legacy. You need to decide who you're going to leave it to, why you're going to leave it to them, and how much you want to leave them. You're going to get targets. We're actually going to build targets and reverse engineer this thing. So you're going to get the big picture of, I have maybe, let's say 10 people and I have a certain dollar amount I want to give each of them. Let's say that adds up to $25 million. Now I have my target. By the time I die, I need $25 million to leave these people, plus my estate taxes and other costs. And I've still got to live while I'm here. Right? So that gives you a number. Decide when do I want to have it by? And this is not like when you're dead. Just so you guys know, the when is not when you're dead. If your target is when you're dead, it's too late. Okay? Like you should probably have it in the bag a couple decades before you're dead. Okay, like Sam Walton knew he was leaving a legacy before he died. It was well before he died. So your target should be to produce this in advance. You want to have this in advance. Nano's a planner. Nano likes doing stuff in advance. Nano, how do you feel when stuff doesn't get planned out ahead of time? Stressed out. So imagine when you think about, I'm going to leave a legacy to these people. It's $25 million and I don't know when I'm going to do it. You're going to be stressed out. Okay. You're probably not going to perform. The next thing you've got to do is you need to do the math. You need to figure out if I'm doing it this much for these people by this timeline. If I break that down into production, how much do I need to have invested? How much do I need to have saved? How much do I need to be earning in order for all of this stuff to happen? Okay, this is all the planning. Okay, now the boring part about legacy that nobody likes is now it comes down to this stuff. This is all the stuff that I never get any likes on when I post on Facebook. You need to go earn a bigger paycheck, son. I know it wasn't motivational. You don't feel touched, but it's the truth. You're broke. Go make more money. Okay. Or I post, hey, you made a bunch of money and you were a dumbass. You don't have any of it left. You need to save your money. No one likes that stuff. Okay. They want to know about the $10,000 click funnel. They don't want to know about how do I save money to go invest. Right? So you need to save money. Then you invest the money. Guess what? Investing turns out super boring. Talked to a client today and he's like, yeah, I'm ready for my next deal. And I was like, cool. What do you want to look at? He's like, I want the most boring deal you have. And I was like, coming right up. And he told me, he's like, the reason I like boring deals is they pay every single month, no matter what. Those are the deals you want. You don't want interesting investments. You want boring, safe, predictable, dumb investments. Okay, if it's interesting and it's got flashy bells and whistles and it goes up and down, you don't want that. So you want to invest in stable things and then you measure it against your target. You go back. How am I doing? How am I doing against the math that I set up? Right? Now, what can happen, and I want to have you guys check this out. What can happen is a lot of people won't measure because they're skipping one of the steps. They feel like, well, all I'm doing right now is earning income. I'm not investing. So what's the point of measuring? If you never measure, it's never going to happen. You've got to start somewhere. So maybe you need to look at measuring on one of these subproducts instead. Sure, all I'm doing is earning income. Why do I need to be looking at my legacy target to measure? You're right. You haven't put a drop in the bucket yet because you need to be focused on this. So when you measure, look at this and then realize it means you need to save more money and then measure against saving more money right now. You're in the save stage. We've been talking about this in the mornings. People are so hung up on all these esoteric financial freedom and financial independence and travel and this and that. And it's like, all right, cool. Well, if we boil that down, why haven't you done it yet? Well, because I don't know how to invest. Well, why haven't you invested yet? Why don't I have the information? If you had it, could you? Well, no, why not? Because I don't have any money. So you don't need to be thinking about financial freedom. You need to be thinking about saving some money. Okay. You're not down here yet. So a lot of people, the disconnect is they'll realize that their brain will say, well, I'm not there yet. And then they'll just say, well, then I don't need to look at any of this stuff. because it doesn't apply to me yet. I'm only going to earn income. Therefore, I don't need to look at any of this big level stuff. If you never look at it, it's never going to exist for you. You're never going to become familiar with it. You're not communicating with it. Therefore, you're going to agree with it less and you're going to like it less and then stop doing it. So you do need to look at it, realize that your brain has never once made a mistake. When it tells you you're not there yet, it ain't lying. Like it's on track. If it tells you that, it's the truth. You're not on track. The way you get on track is you do these things. Your brain is trying to tell you that there's pieces missing from the equation. So realize that, recognize it. Okay, right. You're right, brain. I don't save money right now. That's where I need to be focused. And that's where your focus and your attention goes on your metrics. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's really like what you need to be thinking about from that standpoint. Now, once you've done that, you repeat the steps. Okay, you have to remake the decision. You need to make sure you still got the right people. And this is big because these people might change, right? Your crew might look different 20 years down the road. You might want to change that in your estate plan. The reason why you want to give people money might change as well. You might want to update that. How much you want to give them might change. Your deadline might change and your math might change. So this is a very active process. You're always going back and looking at this. Okay, wealthy people, when they build this out, it's not, I did it once, the box is checked, I stick it in my file cabinet, and I never update it again until 7 years later when I meet Wealth Dynamics and they ask me if I've done an estate plan, and I say, oh yeah, 7 years ago. That's not how it works. This is probably every year. You're sitting down, you're reviewing your blueprint, you're reviewing how you did, you're reviewing the estate plan, you're reviewing your goals and purposes and all this high level stuff, and then making the updates where they're appropriate. That's an estate plan. It's an active thing. So I want to go over the big three. Okay, so the big three on the estate plan, the first one is the sacred account. The reason why that's number one is the sacred account creates an instant estate. Okay, so for somebody that might not have assets, if you have a sacred account, that means you have life insurance that will go to somebody. So you already have an estate. You don't need to have a will yet for the life insurance because it's direct to a beneficiary. Right, so it's going to go to whoever you said it needed to go to. It's not going to go to probate. So the life insurance gives you an instant estate and it makes it a lot more real, right? When I got my first life insurance policy and I realized if I die, Lexi's going to get a boatload of money, like that was a real thing for me. I was like, man, that's kind of cool. I'm not going to die, but if I did, she's taken care of. Okay, Nano, you have a policy like is that a real connection for you on like when I pass away, these people get something. It makes it motivating to know like I'm going to help people whether I'm here or whether I'm not. That's how you win the game. Whether I'm here or whether I'm not, whether I clock out early or I get all the way to the finish line, I'm going to do what I said I wanted to do. Next thing is have a will. Okay. This makes it to where your assets are assigned. So you have beneficiary designated accounts where if they have a beneficiary, this would be life insurance. It would be a 401k plan. It would be an IRA. Those already have a beneficiary. They're not going to go through the probate process. They're going to go directly to your beneficiary. You have other things that don't have beneficiaries. This could be your house. This could be money in the bank. This could be, basically non-qualified, non-assigned, non-designated assets. If you don't have a will, these things will go through probate and they will get assigned by the court. So a will makes it so the court can't decide and the state can't decide where your assets go. Okay, how bad would that suck? You're up there in heaven watching down like on the highlight reel and you see the court and you're like, oh, I meant for that to go to my daughter and instead it went to this person because the court said I should have probably wrote that on my will. That would kind of suck. The will helps you avoid that. And then finally, you have the revocable living trust. This makes it so that your assets also avoid probate. So the will still go through probate. Okay, the trust avoids probate altogether. So if I put my stuff in a trust, the trust becomes the owner. So when I die, I don't own those things. The trust does, and the trust didn't die. Therefore, nothing needs to be transferred because it's like a company. It's like an entity. The entity still owns my stuff, right? So this is huge to look at. These are the big three. They will probably go in this sequence: sacred account, then you get a will, then you get a trust. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Now check this out. For too many people, legacy is an afterthought. It should be the forethought. A lot of people will buy, I had like back when I first started, people will buy life insurance like this. Husband went fishing, had a scare, thought he was going to die, so he bought life insurance. That's good. Like technically, yeah, you have it, but you shouldn't almost die before you make it happen. Okay. A lot of people will get a will because they see somebody else die that didn't have one. They see how hard it was for the family. And then they realize, I need to get a will. Okay. Now, a lot of people, and I'm not even going to say a lot of people get a trust. A lot of people don't. Like, this seems to be one that people just, because of the lack of education, they just steer clear of it. They don't even do it. But a lot of people should do this, because when you see probate cases, we just had a client that they inherited some money. It went through probate. In the fine print, the attorney snuck in there 30 grand. Think about that. I would be pissed if I left my kids money and I found out the attorney found a way to snake 30 grand out of it. No value either. Like, it's not like it was difficult to read a will. There's no reason why that should cost 30 grand. That goes back to like the financial advisor paying them, what did we say? It was $2,025 an hour or whatever it was. Like, crazy amounts of money. Like, the trust protects you from that. Right? Now, here's some examples that I want to give you guys. So check this out. Let's say I have a life insurance. That life insurance pays a death benefit to a trust for my kids. The trust states that the money will be a matching plan. And this is something we actually heard of a client doing. For every dollar my children earn, the trust will match them $1. For every dollar my children invest, the trust will match them $1. How much money do you think my kids are going to want to go make? A lot. Okay. How much do you think they're going to want to invest that money? A lot. And so I'm incentivizing them to be productive. I'm incentivizing them to do what I did. Okay. Nano, how motivated would you be at like 18 if that plan was set up for you at your first job?
All in.
All in. Like, your life would be different. Your mindset outlook would be different. Okay. So check that out. That's one example. Another example, I have life insurance that pays a death benefit to my surviving spouse and my kids. It goes into a trust and it's invested in cash flowing real estate to provide passive income to replace my income forever. This would be like mom and dad, husband and wife, they have kids. Husband is the breadwinner, for example. He passes away. Traditionally, what most families do is they have their life insurance pay out just a lump sum. It'll pay off the debt. It'll pay off the mortgage. Mom has $200,000 left. She goes and sees a financial advisor, usually the guy that wrote the policy, and then they'll put it in mutual funds and she'll try not to touch any of it because she's got to figure out how to make sure it doesn't run out. That's usually what happens. So we're saying that life insurance comes in, it goes directly into a trust. The trust pays off all their debt, handles the mortgage, all that stuff, but the remainder, it sticks it into cash flowing real estate that reproduces at least what my income was. See, dads and even moms, you have to think about yourself from an economic standpoint. You are an asset. You produce income for your family. I know there's a lot of lovey-dovey stuff you do and things like that too, but you produce income. Therefore, if you leave, yes, there's a lot of like different things like emotionally that are gone, but the main thing that's gone is the income. Okay, the world is not going to care that you didn't tuck them back into bed that night. No one's going to know that or care about that. The world will care. Can you pay for groceries? Can you pay your light bill this month? Like, you should be thinking about that, and you should be thinking of yourself that way. If I die, I am replaced financially. Not meaning that a lump sum of money that is the approximate value of me comes in. It's my income keeps going. My income is reproduced. It never stops. It's infinity, right? Another example. So this one's kind of cool. Life insurance pays out to a nonprofit organization. That nonprofit organization is owned by my estate. Okay. That nonprofit organization, which is owned by my estate, then employs my family after I'm gone. And it does whatever my family is passionate about. Okay. So it could be benevolent works. It could be charity. It could be education. It could be financial literacy. Like, how cool would it be for my whole family that maybe they're passionate about this thing together? They're employed by a nonprofit. They're paid now for life to do that thing that they love because I set things up the right way. Okay, these are the concepts. These are just ideas I came up with today on the spot. Here's another one. A trust-owned family office is set up to be run by my family. The life insurance pays out to the trust once again. Their full-time jobs are to learn about, steward, and grow the assets. So if you have a family that's really interested in finances, or maybe they're not quite financially literate and they need to be, you put them in charge of it. Anyone else in the room learned something that maybe they weren't interested in, but you were put in charge of? Because of that, you had to become interested and now you're an expert at it? Okay, what's an example for you, Mike?
they had my family growing up, we had a restaurant.
Yeah.
So I was the busboy and the dishwasher. I was like, shoot, well, I have to do this every day until we sell this thing or go bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
And so I became really good at knowing how to operate a washing machine. Like the old push and go, and like, so anybody come in my area, like, hey, step back.
Yeah.
Like,
that's my machine.
It's dishwashing, you know, but
yeah.
Like, it's every day.
So and before that, were you really into washing the dishes? No. So my point is that's a good way to take somebody that maybe is poor at something, maybe disinterested, and put them in an environment where they have no choice but to improve and become masterful at it. To say, hey, dad's no longer around. He puts you in charge of $2 billion. Here's the instructions. You have oversight and management that's going to make sure you're not screwing it up. Go figure it out. They're going to figure it out. Like that's a great way to go about it. Now, the final one here, this was the one that I thought of as well. So life insurance that pays out on my death, that funds life insurance on my kids' and grandkids' lives, and pays into a dynasty trust so that when they passed away, our wealth is guaranteed to live on in future generations because of that death benefit. There's so many ways you can spin this, guys. Jeremy cocked his head on that one. You had a question?
No, just following the circle.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing you can do where it's like, well, maybe they don't need money, but maybe I want to make sure 3 or 4 generations also doesn't need money. So my trust insures them. They, when they die, have that money pass into the trust as well. And now their kids and grandkids and their kids and grandkids have money too. Like I'm telling you guys, this is real stuff. I posted an article. Who saw that article I posted? It was like a $200 billion life insurance policy. Yeah, insane. There's no reason they're just for estate taxes. The guy doesn't have that much money where he needs that much money just for estate taxes. Yeah, that's part of it, but I guarantee he's thinking about this stuff. He's thinking if I'm a billionaire now, I'm going to make sure my kids are trillionaires by the time they get it. Right? That needs to be your mindset. Now, the typical estate plan looks like this. And I'm going to get some water real quick before I go into this one. So the typical estate plan, we have mom and dad retire, 65 years old, right? Living the golden years. Mom and dad live off their retirement income. They have a paid off house. How classic is that? Right? 62, 65, house is paid off, couple $1,000,000 in retirement. Now, at some point, mom and dad die. Mom and dad, if they're responsible, they did have a will. Okay. And basically what happens is the kids split the retirement account. They sell the house. They all get a chunk. Nobody gets wealthy. And they run out of all of that money by the end of their lives. The end. Did you see any generational wealth happen here? None. So when you look at like, this is not a good estate plan. An estate plan should create generational wealth. So if this is your plan, you're basically just like binging on money for the last 30 years of your life, dying early, and then giving your kids money to binge on until they run out. It's not going to improve their lives. They might pay off some debt, but it's going to be short-lived. Versus what we've just talked about, which is growing multiple generations of wealth. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is what happens if you don't do anything. Okay, who's wondered that before? What if I just don't do any of that stuff? Okay, sometimes it might even seem attractive. You're like, man, this seems like a lot of stuff. What if I just don't do any of it? Right? So what happens if you don't do anything? So you get to live dumb and happy with no responsibility for your legacy. You pass away. Your beneficiary accounts are paid to your beneficiaries. By the way, the people that weren't beneficiaries are now going to be pissed at your beneficiaries. They got the money instead of them. They're going to wonder, why did dad give money to Sally and not Bob? Bob's going to have to explain that to Sally, and Sally's going to have to explain that to Bob. So there's some turmoil. You didn't have a will, so your assets go through probate and are taken into state custody. By the way, the state decides where your things will go. So the whole Bob-Sally situation, that's about to happen with your entire family because it's just going to get distributed any which way. People are going to think that they were going to get this. They were entitled to it. They felt like it. You might have even had a verbal conversation. The state doesn't care. They're going to follow whatever their distribution plan is. By the way, the hefty court fees will cost usually about 15% of the total estate. That process will be about 18 months average. You're dead. None of this stuff matters to you. You're gone. You had a happy life. You died easy. You weren't worried about any of this, but your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, everyone you care about, I'm not going to say they hate you because you're not supposed to hate a dead person, but they're not psyched about what you did. Okay. You talk to anyone that had to go through this, and they will be like, yeah, it was a headache. It was a nightmare. Okay. If you ever had to be an executor on an estate, or you knew someone that was, that's like a full-time job until it's done. Right. And you have all these crazy relatives and they all start fighting. It's terrible. So you're basically leaving your family a mess. That's what happens if you don't do anything. And if you're cool with that, awesome. I hope they don't get you anything for Christmas if you admitted that, because they're going to end up having to take it over anyways when you die because you didn't have your estate plan. But if you're looking at this and you're like, yeah, that would kind of be a sucky thing to do to somebody, that should be the minimal reason why you do an estate plan. The real reason should be legacy. It should be purpose and goals. But if you're like, well, what if I don't do any of this? This is what will happen. It's going to be just a mess for everyone else in your life that's involved. And I would say, like, just to end this conversation on this note, I would say just minimally, you don't have the right to do that to them. You don't have the right to take their time that way. You don't have the right to take their attention that way. And you don't have the right to dictate their energy for the next 18 months after you die. That's not your right. You're going to if you don't do anything. And I'm saying that that's not something you have the right to do. So your responsibility is to make sure that it doesn't go down that way. Now, what tools do I need? Number one, we talked about this. You need a sacred account. This guarantees you will have an estate. Number two, you need a blueprint. This provides a wealth accumulation strategy. You've got to have an estate to give in the first place. Number three, you've got to have a will. This provides a basic wealth distribution strategy. Number four, a revocable living trust. This provides an advanced wealth distribution strategy beyond just the will. And then number five, you need an irrevocable sacred account trust at the point where you're going to pay sacred account or estate taxes. The sacred account will cover those for you and reimburse that back to your family. Okay. In sequence of probably order of importance and just chronologically when these things will happen, this is how it's going to look. Right now, really quick, I'm going to take a break. We're going to do our leading by example. These are two of my favorite people, by the way. This is our clients, Brad and Jeannie Herndon from the Herndon family. We picked them this week as our leading by example. The reason why, Mike, how many sacred account juniors are they doing right now? 9. They have 9 sacred account juniors going on. So Brad and Jeannie, Brad and I go back a long time. So does Jeannie. Brad was my youth pastor when I was like 15 or 16 years old. Okay. So I've known Brad forever. He's known me forever. Brad, they recently set up 9 sacred account juniors. Okay. Covering their kids and their grandkids. They're putting money into each one of them, and they're actually setting this thing up so that their kids and grandkids have money growing for them. Okay, now when I interviewed Brad, the reason that was important for Brad is Brad's grandfather did that for his family. So Brad's grandfather was a farmer. He set aside money and invested it, grew it to a several $1 million balance on his assets, gave that in his estate plan to his kids. One of the kids was Brad's aunt, who never got married and never had kids. So she had all this money. She basically just left it in investments. So it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. She recently passed away. She distributed it to all of her nieces, her nephews, her kids, her grandkids. So Brad and Jeannie got a chunk that was from Brad's grandpa down to his aunt and his dad. His dad did the same thing. Now Brad gets this money from his aunt. And so Brad said the first thing he thought was, I have to keep the cycle going. This came from grandpa down to dad, down to my aunt, down to me. His first responsibility in his mind was, I need to make sure my kids get it. And then I need to make sure that their kids get it. Right? So he set this up because he knew that that's the way it needs to go. Yes, he invested for himself. Yes, he did other stuff. We went through their entire blueprint with them and put together a great strategy. But this was one of the first things on his mind because he was just carrying on the way he got the money. He wanted to continue the cycle. So I want to read to you guys what Brad said. So Brad said, my understanding of the sacred account and how it works and can benefit you has been so great. The idea that you have to be stuck in an annuity plan at 0.057% interest is not appealing anymore. For years, all I did was basically find different funds and annuities, trying to keep money and not trying to earn more money. The sacred account is a way that we can teach our kids and grandkids that they can have their money, but they can also use it simultaneously, turn in an extra layer of profit and another stream of income. That's pretty cool, right? Like that's a good reason to set up a sacred account for their kids. And what I love here is these are baby boomers, they're in the age where people did work the 40-year job and pay off the house and stack up money in the retirement plan. And they're saying the idea that they're going to just do that and stack up money at minimal interest is not appealing. They understand their money can be growing for them, and they're making sure that their kids and grandkids understand that early on in life. Okay, so that's something I want to share with you. They are clients of ours on the Sacred Account Junior ×9. They've done gold and silver bullion. They have Legal Shield, 401k banking, private placement investments, and life settlements as well. So they're really involved with their finances. And so these are, again, like they got off to a later start than most. They didn't have money from day one. They had a family, they had expenses, responsibilities, and they still made it happen because it was always a priority. So that's kind of what I wanted to hit there. Now, really quick, guys, we went through executive compensation, tax planning, legacy planning, and that's the life cycle of the Sacred Account. If we do all the stuff we talked about, then it goes back to here. Except this time, it's not your understanding of money, it's that of your kids. It's that of your grandkids. So if you follow this thing all the way through full cycle, it's important that the people that get that money, for Brad and Jeannie, for example, it's important that these people know what is money, okay? How do I keep more of the money? How do I scale wealth? How do I save? How do I pay off debt? That's all stuff that in your legacy plan, it goes beyond just giving them the money. It goes to, again, systems. How do I make sure that this thing goes full circle? And like we talk about, it's infinite. This can go on however many generations you want to take it. But it comes down to, again, you made the decision. You put the plan in place. You produced the assets. And then you had the systems in place to make sure that it maintained. Okay. So real quick, I want to do action steps and keep these short. We will jump into some questions. So the first thing you need to do, number one, start your Sacred Account. Have an estate in the first place. Have that down. Then you get on your blueprint. That's going to be your wealth accumulation strategy. Then you have your will. Then we work on your trust. And then we follow the plan and stay committed. Okay, like the estate plan is not super active where every day you're working on your estate plan per se. But every day you kind of are. From the standpoint of every day you're doing something that's contributing to you having an estate. Right? So short list, but they're very vital things you need to have done. All right. So real quick, I want to open this up for questions. What do we have here for questions in the room or online?
Yes. So Marcy wanted to kind of have you go into the main difference between the revocable and irrevocable trust. So that came up.
Yeah. So it is kind of what it sounds like. Revocable means that I can set the trust up and then I can make changes. Because I can change my beneficiaries. I can get the assets back out of the trust. I can liquidate it. It's a very easy process. Irrevocable means that I've set the trust up to where none of those things can be changed. I put assets into it, they're not mine anymore. It's very hard to make changes on an irrevocable living trust. Now, a revocable trust, once you die, also becomes irrevocable. So once you pass away, it becomes irrevocable. What you had in there when you died can't get changed. Okay, so that's the main difference, Marcy, is one of them, it's fluid in and out, make changes. The other one, it's kind of set in stone, it's done. There are processes you could go through to change an irrevocable living trust. They're very arduous, so it's better just not to do one if you're not ready for it yet.
We got one from Victor Cubius. So he says, so I work full time and I only have a certain amount in my 401k. I want to leave a legacy for my kids. How do I do that if what I have now is not even enough for my retirement?
So Victor, that's a super good question. I'm glad we had that. So most people are there. Okay. So most people that are watching, they're in a position like Victor where they're like, I'm just worrying about my own stuff. How do I plan for my kids? So Victor, the first thing is get a Sacred Account. Okay. The Sacred Account is a life insurance policy. It has a death benefit. Like that would make it to where you know your kids are taken care of regardless of whether your 401k is enough. The nice thing on the Sacred Account is the life insurance is almost just like a byproduct. It really is a forced savings and investing plan. That's going to help you build up more assets than what you have in your 401k so that you have enough passive income for you and you know your kids are taken care of. And I would say on the 401k, the only legacy you're leaving on that thing is the IRS, Wall Street. They're going to get the fees and the taxes. You'll get whatever's left, if anything. And at that point, inflation's happened and you got to really look at what am I making above and beyond that number.
There's a question here. Does this work if I'm a dependent on my taxes?
I'm assuming you mean probably the legacy planning in general. If you're a dependent, you still can legacy plan. Dependent just means that somebody claims that they pay for you on taxes. So it doesn't negate you being able to have a will, have an estate, have a sacred account. So definitely still do that. Dependent literally is just like if I was Jeremy's dependent, it means that Jeremy pays my living expenses and he can write that off for claiming on his taxes. So we have Jeremy and I have a good agreement set up with that. I call him Papa Jeremy. Papa J.
How often should you review your legacy blueprints? Like every 6 months, annually? What is your kind of thoughts on, you know, since I am getting as old as I am on Medicare and stuff.
He's bitter. That's called bitter if you're watching, by the way.
So what do you think for how often?
That's a good question. So reviewing the estate plan, I would say on the blueprint part, because that's more active finances, that's probably like quarterly where we're sitting down like we've been doing, update numbers and stuff. The actual will, the living will, the trust, those are usually once a year type things where you just review it. Unless you have like a significant change, like I acquired a new asset or I had a baby or somebody died or something of that nature, got married, that's where you would change them maybe on more of an audible call because of a new thing that happened. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Awesome. So guys, this has been our Friday Night Wealth Creation course. Make sure you focus on legacy, legacy, legacy. We will be back next week with a new topic because we graduated out of this sacred account life cycle. And so I'm excited to share that with you. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you haven't done so already, go to our Google page, leave us a positive 5-star review. I do need to add, don't be too ecstatic with the review. I found out Google filters though. So if you're too excited, Google actually pulls your review off. So do like a mildly conservative message in the review. 5 stars is cool, but don't go over the top if we want Google to leave it on there. So thank you again. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys next time.